He left his wife mocked, her struggle, and flaunted a shiny new life. But on the day of their divorce, as he smugly arrived at court, the unexpected happened. A sleek limousine pulled up. Out stepped the woman he thought he'd broken, radiant, composed, and holding secrets. He never saw coming what followed inside the courtroom, turning whispers into gasps and leaving Marcus speechless. What could a single mom possibly unveil that would turn the tide so drastically? Stick around, because this isn't just a story about revenge, it's about rising with grace. The front door slammed so hard it rattled the picture frames on the hallway wall. Marcus didn't bother with goodbyes, not to the home he shared with Leah for 7 years, not to the son who was napping upstairs. His duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his eyes burning with contempt. "I can't keep carrying dead weight," he said without a hint of hesitation. "I'm done, Leah." Leah stood in the kitchen, one hand still wrapped around a dish rag, the other bracing against the counter. Her eyes didn't water. Not yet. She didn't beg him to stay. She had learned long ago that Marcus only stayed where praise and power followed. Tasha was waiting outside in her bright red Jeep, engine humming like a purring cat, 26, perky, and a local fitness coach with a thriving Instagram page. She greeted Marcus with a long, rehearsed kiss and a proud glance toward the house. Marcus climbed in and never looked back. Leah didn't cry. Not that day. That day she had dishes to finish and a toddler to feed. That day she turned back to the sink and exhaled slowly, as if blowing out the last flame of a burned-out candle. Weeks passed. Leah picked up extra shifts at the hospital cafeteria and cleaned offices late into the night. Every morning at 5 a.m., she walked her son to daycare in the biting wind, wrapped in her only winter coat, the same one she'd worn for 3 winters straight. Rent notices kept appearing in the mailbox. Groceries were bought by calculator. Meanwhile, Marcus paraded Tasha around like a trophy. Candlelit dinners, weekend spa getaways, gym selfies with obnoxious hashtags. To Marcus, Leah was old news, a washed-up single mom who could barely keep the lights on. When he filed the divorce papers, he didn't even bother telling her in person. He just mailed them, neatly folded, with a court date and a sticky note that read, "Let's make this quick." He told friends at the bar that she'd go quietly, that Leah was too tired, too broke, too boring to fight. Tasha laughed over drinks one night and said, "She'll probably show up in sweatpants and a ponytail." Marcus smirked. "If she shows up at all." In the months leading to the hearing, Leah barely replied to any legal communication. She signed a few documents but didn't argue over the details. Marcus assumed it was resignation, that she knew she'd lost. He never asked how she was paying for legal representation, never wondered why she didn't contest anything. He figured she had no choice. To Marcus, the math was simple. Young and vibrant, Tasha was an upgrade. Leah was the woman he'd outgrown. But while Marcus grew louder in his arrogance, Leah grew quieter in her resilience. She cooked, cleaned, worked 2 jobs, and every night after her son went to sleep, she sat alone at the dining table, reading, researching, planning. Not revenge, not even a comeback. Something stronger. Marcus's mistake wasn't just underestimating Leah. His mistake was assuming that broken meant finished. And in doing so, he walked away from more than a marriage. He walked away from the storm that was just beginning to gather. It was 3 a.m., and Leah had just finished her second job cleaning office buildings downtown. Her muscles ached, her eyelids hung heavy, but her grip on her son remained steady. A dull pain throbbed in her lower back, a constant reminder of too many nights spent bent over mop buckets and greasy floors. Inside their small apartment, she tucked him into bed with the same lullaby she had sung every night since Marcus walked out. Then she sat in the kitchen with a mug of cheap coffee, eyes staring at the stack of unpaid bills. The rent was due, the power bill was past due, there was only $10 left in her purse. The next morning, she dragged herself through another shift at the hospital cafeteria, serving food to patients and cleaning up after them. Her son stayed at a neighbor's until she could get home. This was a rhythm now, survival, hour by hour. That afternoon, while driving home, she stopped at a gas station on a whim. Her gas tank was nearly empty, but something strange moved her. Leah stared at the lottery display for a moment, then with a breath, she slid her final $10 bill across the counter. "One scratch off," she said. The clerk handed it over and she shoved it in her coat pocket, forgetting about it as the weight of exhaustion pulled her through another sleepless night. It wasn't until sunrise the next morning, after brewing weak coffee with the last grounds in the tin, that she remembered. Sitting at the kitchen table, she scratched the silver foil with a bent key. The numbers didn't make sense at first. She blinked, looked again, matched them against the prize list on the back. Then the mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Her fingers trembled as she reread the ticket. $500 million. She stood in stunned silence. No scream, no leap of joy. Just stillness, like the world had paused for a breath it didn't know it was holding. By noon that same day, she had spoken to no one, not even her sister. They hadn't spoken properly in months. Too many unmet expectations, too many silences left to rot. She quietly called the lottery office and began the verification process. Within 48 hours, the money was real. The magnitude of it hit her not like a tidal wave, but like a rising tide, slow, cold, deliberate. And then she made a choice. She didn't buy new clothes or a car. She didn't quit her job. She simply showed up to work that week as usual. Leah moved with the same quiet determination, but behind her eyes something had shifted. Once she'd dreamed of becoming a nurse, even aced her first semester, but life, rent, and diapers didn't pause for ambition. She opened a private bank account, separate from anything Marcus ever had access to. She researched attorneys. She hired a female financial advisor from across town, one who knew how to keep things discreet. She secured a modest home in her name only, safe, clean, with a fenced backyard. For her son, she set up a trust in his name. She paid off her debts but let the rest sit untouched. She told no one, not because she didn't want to celebrate, but because she wanted to wait. To see how far Marcus would go when he thought she had nothing left. To see what Tasha would say when she thought Leah was beneath her. To see how the world behaved when it assumed she was broken. Leah knew there would be a court date. Soon, she'd receive the papers. The smirking tone of Marcus's lawyer had been clear. They expected her to show up frazzled, cornered, and desperate. They thought they were winning. So Leah waited quietly until the day she would let them see exactly who she'd become. By all appearances, Leah hadn't changed. She still wore the same faded coat to her shifts at the hospital cafeteria, still pushed the same old shopping cart through the discount aisle, still stood in the same checkout line, counting coupons. To the world, she looked like a woman surviving, not thriving. A single mom doing her best to hold things together after being abandoned. Just one of many. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Marcus, meanwhile, couldn't help himself. He told his friends she was practically invisible now, tucked away somewhere, folding aprons and microwaving leftovers. He laughed at the thought of her showing up to the divorce hearing with a wrinkled blouse and a public defender. She'll sign the papers and disappear, he gloated at a bar one night, Tasha draped over his arm like a trophy. But while Marcus pined and bragged, Leah moved with quiet precision. She wasn't disappearing. She was documenting. She began collecting bank records and emails, pulling text messages he'd forgotten about. Screenshots, photos. She even tracked the dates Marcus withdrew funds from their joint account after he had already moved in with Tasha, while Leah was left paying rent alone. Lights flickering in and out. She kept every missed call, every email, every insult tucked away. She remembered how he'd yelled the night he left. "You're a burden, you and that kid." That, too. She recorded his voice, caught on her phone by accident, never deleted. Every detail mattered now. She hired her lawyer, quietly paying in full. She didn't blink at the retainer. She sat through consultations, taking notes while nodding calmly, never revealing how deep her resources ran. Her attorney was impressed by her preparedness but never guessed why. And when Leah came home from long shifts and tucked her son into bed, she'd sit at the kitchen table under a single light, flipping through evidence like a surgeon examining X-rays, methodical, thorough, and quiet. She never posted on social media, never clapped back at Tasha's veiled jabs, never fed the gossip Marcus stirred. Instead, she smiled at the nurses, paid her bills on time, and waited. She was building something Marcus didn't understand, because he only measured power by what he could flaunt. Leah measured it in silence, in strategy. In truth, the divorce date was set. Marcus was already joking about it to coworkers. Tasha had picked out a white dress, not for a wedding, but to make a statement in court. And Leah? She simply circled the date in her calendar, closed a folder of documents, and whispered to herself with quiet certainty, "Soon, everything will be revealed." The courthouse buzzed with low chatter as Marcus adjusted his collar for the third time that morning. He stood just outside the steps, flanked by Tasha, who wore a tight cream dress better suited for a beach club than a courtroom. Her lips were glossy, her laugh sharp, as she scrolled through her phone, glancing now and then at the people gathering. Marcus grinned to himself. "She'll be here any minute," he said. "Probably looking for parking in that rusty sedan." Tasha smirked. "Hope she remembered the hearing. Maybe we'll get lucky and they'll finalize it without her." Inside, clerks prepped files, lawyers checked their watches, and then it happened. A low hum of an engine grew louder. Heads began to turn. Tires kissed the curb with practiced elegance as a sleek black limousine rolled to a stop outside the courthouse. The doors opened with a gentle hush, and out stepped Leah. She wasn't the woman Marcus remembered, hunched from exhaustion, hair in a messy bun, clothes stained from work or worry. No, this woman was something else entirely. Leah wore a deep navy gown that flowed like water and caught the morning light in subtle glints. Her hair was swept into an elegant updo, and the silver heels she stepped out in clicked with finality against the courthouse steps. Her son held her hand, dressed smartly in a fitted blazer, his eyes wide but proud. Marcus's jaw fell open. Tasha blinked twice, as if trying to focus. "Is that her?" Leah didn't glance their way. She didn't need to. The air shifted the moment she stepped onto the path. The murmurs began instantly, from clerks, bystanders, even two young attorneys by the door. Marcus scrambled to regain his posture, pulling at his jacket like it would help. Somehow help him stand taller. Tasha's confident posture wilted as she looked down at her dress, suddenly aware of its inappropriateness. Leah walked through the courthouse doors with the serenity of someone who had already won. She didn't fidget, didn't search the crowd. She held herself with poise, eyes forward, every step deliberate. She didn't need to speak. Her presence was thunder and silence. The courtroom, already filling with attendees, fell into a hush. Even the bailiff paused for a heartbeat as Leah entered. Marcus stared at her as she passed him. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him. She didn't have to. Tasha gripped Marcus's arm a little tighter. "You said she couldn't afford gas," she whispered. Marcus didn't reply. His confidence evaporated with each echo of Leah's heels. The woman he'd left, the woman he'd mocked and dismissed, now moved like royalty in a courtroom he thought he owned. Leah approached the front bench, her lawyer already waiting. She greeted her attorney with a calm nod and sat gracefully, smoothing her gown and folding her hands over her lap. Her son sat beside her, calm as ever, a reflection of the mother who'd raised him. Marcus shuffled behind her, his lawyer struggling to catch up. Tasha hesitated at the courtroom door before sliding into the back row, her expression unreadable. The judge entered moments later, but even he paused at the sight of Leah. Marcus had shown up expecting to win by absence of power, of money, of fight, but what he hadn't anticipated was presence. And Leah had arrived not to plead or to beg, but to reign. The courtroom settled into a low murmur as the judge took the bench, adjusting his glasses and scanning the docket. Marcus leaned back in his chair, still trying to shake off the unsettling presence of Leah's grand arrival. Tasha sat behind him, unusually silent, her once playful smirk long gone. Marcus didn't notice that her grip on her clutch had tightened, knuckles pale. He was too busy glancing back at Leah, hoping for a sign of hesitation, some proof that she was still the same overwhelmed woman he had walked out on. But Leah was composed. Eerily so. She didn't fidget. She didn't look around nervously. She didn't look at him at all. The judge called the case, and Marcus's attorney, a budget hire with more confidence than competence, stood first, rattling off generic arguments about incompatibility, irreconcilable differences, and Marcus's supposed financial hardship. He positioned Marcus as the one carrying the burden during their marriage, downplaying the divorce as an amicable separation. Leah's attorney rose next. His posture alone was enough to silence the room. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth and practiced. Before we move forward, we'd like to submit Exhibits A through G, documents detailing Mr. Marcus Taylor's extramarital affairs, forged financial statements, and evidence of child abandonment. Marcus blinked. What? The judge raised an eyebrow. You may proceed. The attorney handed over a folder thick with carefully tabbed pages. Leah had been quiet, but she hadn't been idle. Page by page, the truth unfolded. There were screenshots of messages between Marcus and Tasha during the time he was still living with Leah. Boasts of his escape plan, flirtatious selfies, even dates arranged while Leah worked night shifts. Next came financial statements. Transactions traced to Marcus's name showed he had siphoned money from their shared account, redirecting it to a private one. Loans taken in Leah's name without her consent, debt stacked neatly on her shoulders while he played house with someone else. And finally, proof of child abandonment. Legal documents and hospital records detailing nights Leah spent with their son alone, while Marcus vanished for weeks without contact. Marcus's mouth opened, but no words came out. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering frantically. But Marcus was frozen. Tasha's breathing quickened. She shifted in her seat as the evidence mounted. She looked at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. Not the charming man who'd painted himself a victim of a cold marriage, but a coward cloaked in arrogance. Then Leah's lawyer calmly stated, "We are also petitioning for full custody of the child, reparations for the financial damages, and a protection order due to Mr. Taylor's fraudulent behavior." The judge took a long pause. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Tasha stood abruptly. Her heels clicked against the floor as she made her way to the exit, head down. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't wait for Marcus. She didn't want to be part of the fallout. Marcus watched her go, a faint panic beginning to settle into his features. He turned toward Leah for the first time since entering the courtroom. She met his gaze finally, but there was no anger in her eyes, just clarity. A stillness that came from rising, not reacting. She'd seen the worst of him, and she'd chosen not to fight in the mud, but to stand in truth. Marcus's voice cracked. "Leah, you didn't have to," her lawyer interjected. "She did, because while you were busy mocking her, she was building a case and a life." The judge leaned forward, composed. "I've seen enough." And Marcus, for the first time since walking out, realized he had just lost everything. Not because Leah had changed, but because she'd never stopped being the woman he underestimated. The courtroom held its breath. Marcus sat slumped in his chair, collar slightly wilted, beads of sweat visible on his forehead. His lawyer whispered again, but it was clear. There was nothing left to argue. The facts had spoken, and they echoed louder than Marcus's earlier arrogance. Leah remained still, her posture unshaken, her expression unreadable. She hadn't flinched once, even when every detail of Marcus's deceit had been laid bare in the open. No smugness, no bitterness, only resolve. She didn't come to humiliate, only to finish what he had started. The judge adjusted his robe, then looked up from the pile of documents and typed exhibits before him. "I've reviewed all submitted evidence and testimonies," he began, voice steady and final. "There is clear and compelling proof of Mr. Marcus Taylor's repeated infidelity, financial misconduct, and neglectful behavior as a father." Marcus stared down at the desk in front of him, hands clenched into useless fists. "Accordingly," the judge continued, "I hereby grant full physical and legal custody of the minor child to Mrs. Leah Taylor. Furthermore, Mr. Taylor will be held liable for all financial damages incurred as a result of the fraud detailed in the exhibits. He is ordered to pay restitution in full." The gavel came down with a sharp thud, sealing a verdict that left one party liberated and the other undone. Marcus sat motionless, his eyes searching for an anchor in a storm he never saw coming. The woman he once called dead weight had just carried herself through a legal storm with the grace and precision of a woman who knew her worth, who had simply waited for the right time to show it. He looked at her, silently pleading for a reaction, a sneer, a scolding, even just a glance that said, "I told you so." But Leah gave him nothing. She rose from her seat slowly, dignified. Her navy gown swayed with every step, her heels clicking softly on the tile as she walked past him without a glance. In the hallway, the sound hit like a tidal wave. Reporters, photographers, curious onlookers, all surged toward her with questions and flashbulbs. Cameras clicked like rapid fire. Mrs. Taylor, how did it feel to win the case? Was the limousine your way of making a statement? Do you have any comments on your ex-husband's behavior? Leah didn't flinch. She paused just long enough to gather her breath, her composure as solid as ever. Her lawyer moved ahead, parting the crowd with a raised hand. She offered no words, only a subtle shake of her head. To speak now would have diluted everything she had just accomplished with silence. The strength of her story wasn't in the verdict. It was in the restraint she had shown, the dignity she had carried, even when she had every reason to shout. She had been underestimated, mocked, and discarded. But in the end, she didn't just win a divorce settlement. She walked out as a woman who never let pain turn her cruel, who let truth speak louder than revenge. Leah reached the limousine, where the driver opened the door without a word. She slid inside, the door closing softly behind her, muffling the chaos she left behind. And Marcus? He remained in the courtroom, slumped, watching the exit she had just taken. For the first time since leaving her, he realized she never needed to raise her voice to silence a room. She only had to rise and upgrade her life. If this story touched your heart, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful, soul-touching stories that restore faith in humanity.